Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the City Chatter Podcast. I'm John Bernstrom, Public Information Officer for the City of Grand Forks. This is episode 16. Hey, they've let us go through the council 2 full times, so I appreciate that. And joining us this week from Ward 7, Councilmember Ken Veen. Ken, thank you for joining us.
Very nice to be here.
Yeah, it was okay the first time that it was okay to come back a second time?
Yeah, I felt like with confidence come back and feel okay.
What people don't realize is I've badgered Ken pretty hard at council meetings. Hey, when are you going to be here? When are you going to be around? Ken, let's get into it. It's the new year, but very busy early on here in January. As a council, you guys got a briefing from the consultants regarding bridges, and I'm just using that plural, and I'm using that broadly. Can you talk about the briefing you got? One, this consultants, what are they hired for? It's not building the bridge. What is their purpose?
Well, my understanding was obviously not to build a bridge. That hasn't been decided. But what is the process that you need to go through to actually go build the bridge, continue the planning, build the bridge for the long term? This bridge isn't on the federal aid system, so it's a little different than the others that we've worked at. So the cities of East Grand Forks, who actually took the lead on this, worked with the city of Grand Forks and the 2 counties to look at, hey, let's figure out exactly how we can go about implementing this when the time comes.
So there was an interesting thing during that briefing at the committee of the whole. Minnesota has different rules than North Dakota. Sounds like more strict rules or just more rules in general. So if North Dakota doesn't have a rule, you follow Minnesota rules because they have a rule. Minnesota had a rule regarding bridges over rivers and floodplains that has been on the books, but they're now enforcing. It caught me by surprise a little bit. Tell me what you know about that, if anything.
Well, not much, because it caught me by surprise, too. I had never heard or seen anything as such. You know, when we did the earlier bridge studies, whether it was any of the locations, the cost for the higher bridges, which is what you'd have to not impede the 100-year floodplain, was quite a bit more. And
yes,
so,
significantly more. Yeah.
And so that became an issue, and we had had primarily looked at keeping it at a lower level, not low, but lower than the 100-year. So I don't know what the implications are going to be. I don't know how variable, how much you can or not challenge that kind of thing, what the special circumstances are, but it has to be followed up on.
Not knowing really all the things you mentioned about that rule, if they're hard fast on that rule, that almost really forces a hand of pretty much only building bridges in rural. I'll use the term rural areas, but it's hard to build a bridge within a municipality with that rule.
It will be, and of course, it depends on the adjacent development.
Right.
So it's really not. It's until you start looking into it more thoroughly, you can't say not or never. But it will have implications, and that has to be incorporated into the plan.
Sure. Also on the agenda early on this year, Epitome Energy, soybean crushing plant, looking to build in the north up by our landfill, northwest of Grand Forks. You guys have gotten a preliminary look at a development agreement. How do I say this? I was going to say, like, how do you feel about having gone through the development agreement now with a second project? Are you more confident with it?
Well, I think this one is much simpler. I think that's probably absolutely more confidence. It is much simpler. I have spent time going through that to try to make sure that we have a little bit of time to understand it and know what we can do if things and how things would change. So I've done enough of a look. I've met internally with a number of staff to see if they could answer my questions. I felt really comfortable with the answers. We still have a ways to go before we know truly what all the costs and the financing is going to be, but I think the development agreement is, from what I can see right now, works as a win-win.
And part of it with that agreement is, I think it's fair to say, there aren't answers to all the questions yet. Part of it, the development agreement is, this question is going to come up and we're going to need this answer, but we don't have that right now.
True, absolutely. And, they need to have, as a developer, some idea that we're going to do it, and we as the owner need to know that we may need more information, and it seemed like it came together pretty well.
Sure, it's one of those negotiations, right, where everyone gives a little, everyone gains a little, right? You know,
Yeah.
when you leave when you leave the table, one side isn't saying, "Oh, we got one over on them." Everyone's just like, "Okay, that's fair."
Yeah, I think we're being real fair.
Perfect. On also during that committee of the whole, there was lots of conversations in multiple levels regarding um, dealings with the county, whether it's the county parking ramp or public health potentially looking at a new space to free up space for the county. Let's talk parking first. I believe you're the one that posed. No, you posed this question with public health, but I think it's fair for both. Maintaining or moving into a space or building a new space, which is cheaper? That's a hard one to answer a little bit because we're kind of dealing with some unknowns.
Yeah, I mean, with everyone, you got to look at life cycle costs. That's what I'm trying to look at. Certainly, you'll have significant, in either case, you can have more or less initial costs, but then you've got the long-term operational costs that are going on. So you've got to be able to take a look at the total equation and be able to see it. I'm a long-term person. I like to look at the entire life cycle. What are you going to do? How do you maintain it? What's going to be your average cost? You're going to have replacement. You're going to have to look at all of that. And so when I like to compare, it's most important that you compare each one equally. Both, in some cases, the do nothing policy, which
Sure.
has a cost to it,
Yep.
and then the cost of doing something and what that's going to do. And of course, there's growth and there's a lot of other factors that have to come together in that. So it's not just an easily said and done. For me, I want to look at what that information and the facts look like.
I think it's fair to say in both of these situations, whether it's parking with the county or public health, the do nothing option is not necessarily the free option.
No, and that's really why you look at these things, because the do nothing has a cost to it that in long term isn't going to work.
Right.
For a number of reasons. So you always got to look at, but you do have to start, I believe, with the do nothing, because that really explains what the problem is. Because if you don't know what the problem is, how do you know you're solving it by doing something additional down the road? So look at that first and see what the implications are.
Speaking of looking forward, doing it right now, so it's maybe not as expensive down the road. You guys got a briefing on indoor turf aquatics early on, moving on that. Did I hear it right at that committee of the whole that potentially hiring 2 contractors because it's almost 2 facilities in one?
No, I'm the way I looked at it is they would have one construction manager at risk, and really a construction manager does that, manages it. They then go out typically when it's an at risk and will take the designs from the architect, and they will bid out all the various pieces separately and bring them together with people who have the right expertise to do that. So we would have one contractor that would build it. Where I think I was looking at it is, as you're in the design process, you may need to have 2 different people look at it from a cost perspective.
Sure.
Oftentimes you need to have the local person who knows the area, knows the pricing, and then you need the help of an expert who maybe has done these things, especially when you talk about pools. And
Yeah.
how you build a pool and what you need to have for the equipment that isn't the norm. And obviously the designer will be well mixed into that. So I like to look at things like this under a 3-legged stool. You have the owner who's able to tell you what you want, you have the designer, and you have the contractor. And the 3 of them together work as a team to build and implement the project.
I think, as I'm speaking as citizen John Bernstrom here, not city employee, it's nice seeing this. It's been talked about. There was a vote, but it's slowly, but it's continuing to move forward, and I think that's a good thing.
Well, I think it's a good thing too. I wouldn't say it's slow. I think it's moving together fairly quickly, and not that that's wrong. I'm amazed at all the work that's been done to date, all the data, all the planning that's in place, and they're working now about us to understand that plan and implement it so that we can get this done sooner rather than later, especially with the concerns we have with aquatics.
Well, and it's reason I said slow, and maybe that's the wrong term, is I've had a couple of phone calls. People are like, well, we passed the vote. Let's start digging. I'm like, well, let's figure out what this thing looks like first.
Yeah, you got to make sure, first of all, we have the plan right, and then we get in there and start doing concepts and look at the various concepts, because expediting that doesn't actually bring value to you. You've got to make sure you know upfront what you're doing.
Sure. You also, I would say you maybe have more expertise on this from a city council member standpoint than the average person. You got an update on summer road construction. Yeah, you engineering background and whatnot, and under being a city employee and working, those long-term plans. It looks like 2024 is going to be another busy year. Well, busy but good for people to know. There's not just willy-nilly. There's lots of planning that goes into the summer work that we see around here.
Yeah, and here where we live, you only got one season to do the work, and so you got to take advantage of it while you can. So yeah, I thought it was a nice, thorough plan. There is going to be a lot of work in town, and people are going to have to get used to it and be aware of where they are. 32nd is a big one that's going to be impacted. There's going to be down to one lane in each direction. Columbia Road overpass is going to end up some of that too.
I think that's the bigger one. We only have so many from north to south crossing those railroad tracks, and we're going to be working on 2 of them.
Yeah, because the Washington Street underpass is the other one that's going to be bid. And so you're going to have both of those at the same time we're planning the third one, which is at 42nd.
Yeah.
So yeah, all of that is going to have some traffic implications, for no doubt.
We've had a few meetings now, 4 months worth in the new council chambers. How's the new digs doing for you?
Oh, they're really great. I really enjoy that. I think it's been well designed. I was worried about levels of security. I think that's been addressed significantly, and just the layout is an easier way to interact with other council members and the public. I think it all came together really well.
No, good. All right, Ken. If people aren't aware, you may see in the summertime Ken Veen on a motorcycle. Every once in a while, Ken will come to a council meeting on a motorcycle. So, Ken, I pulled up some motorcycle facts that we'll see if you're aware of any of these. I'm not going to quiz you, but I thought some of these were interesting. And so, first off, what type of motorcycle do you have?
Well, I have multiple motorcycles, but I have a road bike and a dirt bike, so I do both.
Okay, motorcycle. The person who's credited with inventing the motorcycle was German in 1885. A German inventor. I'm not sure the purpose of it but they say the modern motorcycle. We'll give the German inventor credit for that.
Well, yeah, I mean, what they do is take a bicycle and put a motor on it.
Put a motor, yeah, I know.
And bicycles have been around for a long time, so it's probably...
You got credit for that,
Once
right.
you get a motor, you got to get the right motor, you can make that work.
There you go. The first Harley, 1903.
Right.
That was the first Harley.
I have a 100th anniversary of 2003.
2003.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, I'm not sure if you're one you'd see on the highway going too fast or not, but the known to be the fastest motorcycle. Now, I don't think this is one you can go just buy in a parking lot. I think this was custom made. Was a Dodge Tomahawk. It was a 10-cylinder going 350 miles an hour.
That would be a little scary.
And this one I found interesting. I associate, anyway, again, I'm not a motorcycle driver, but when I hear Kawasaki, I think of motorcycles, right? Mm-hmm. Evidently, they just started making motorcycles for marketing because of what they really did. They worked on government aerospace contracts.
Huh? Didn't know that either. Nope.
They said nobody knows what we do, so when we go to people saying whether it's funding or trying to, they were like, "What do you do?" So they started making motorcycles so they can get their name on a map.
Well, it worked.
It worked. Who would have thought that, huh? Ken, thank you very much for running down here. A busy 2024 to start. You guys are really into it as a council.
There is, and I actually talked to Todd Phelan today. If you look at the things that are on the agenda that we're doing, it's a lot of work, a lot of progressive things happening in the city, and we're all pretty proud of it.
I've mentioned this before, but Mr. Phelan has said this. He said this to department heads. He said it to me. It's something he says. He goes, if we ever have a council meeting and there's nothing on the agenda, that's when we should get worried, not when we have a full agenda that takes 3 hours. All right. Ken, thank you very much, Ward 7 council member, and thank you for watching the City Chatter podcast. If you want to catch any of the past episodes, go to grandforksgov.com/podcast, and you can see all of our previous episodes going back. This was episode 16. So we'll continue now through the spring year in a very busy council season. Ken, thank you very much, and thank you for watching.